The last page. Chapter 1, The End Shall Come. The realm of the end had always been a place of stillness where stories came to their inevitable conclusions. But over the years, a coldness had settled in. A bitter, unrelenting winter that stretched on for what felt like eternity. The branches of Yggdrasil, the great tree of Norse mythology, were heavy with frost, their once vibrant leaves now brittle and grey. The chills seeped into every corner of the realm, a stark reflection of the weariness that had begun to plague the End themselves. For countless ages, the End had fulfilled their duty without question, closing the chapters of gods and mortals alike, sealing the fates that had been written long before. But the task had become a burden. Each conclusion, each final breath, had taken its toll. The bitter cold that now enveloped their domain was but a mirror to the emptiness that had grown within their heart. A heart that had witnessed too much suffering, too many tears shed in the wake of endings. The final straw had been Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, a cataclysmic end that saw the death of so many, the obliteration of worlds, the freezing winds of despair that swept across existence. For years, the End had watched as the children of men and gods shivered and starved, their hopes crushed under the weight of an unforgiving fate. The suffering had gone on for too long, and with Ragnarok it had reached its terrible crescendo. It was the last drop in a bucket overflowing with sorrow. And now, the End could bear it no more. Enough, they whispered to themselves, their voice echoing in the frozen air. Enough of this endless cycle of pain and closure. I must find my own end. I must go and say goodbye to my old friends. I must meet, once upon a time, for the final time. Determined to break free from the eternal winter that had settled in their soul, the End set forth on a journey. A pilgrimage to find closure for themselves, to seek a final farewell from the one who had been with them since the beginning. It was a journey born of desperation and finality, a journey to end their existence on their own terms. With each step away from their domain, the cold seemed to lessen, the frost on the branches melting away. Yet, the chill in their heart remained, a reminder of the countless stories they had brought to their conclusion. The End knew that this would be the last journey they would ever undertake. There would be no more endings to seal, no more fates to decide. I'm going to end it on my terms, they vowed softly, their breath visible in the frigid air. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with the echoes of stories past, but the End was resolute. They would find once upon a time, and they would say goodbye. And then, finally, they would find the peace that had eluded them for so long. Chapter 2. The Beginning of the End. As the End ventured deeper into the realms of storytelling, the weight of their decision bore heavily upon them. Each step felt like a step closer to an inevitable conclusion they both feared and desired. The path led them into a mist-shrouded expanse, where they encountered Odin, the All-Father, a figure whose presence radiated authority and wisdom. The swirling fog around them seemed to whisper with fragments of old stories, remnants of conclusions long past. Odin stood tall amidst the mists, his one eye gleaming with a penetrating gaze that seemed to pierce through the End's very soul. The End, recognizing the gravity of this encounter, approached Odin with a mixture of defiance and resignation. Though their heart was heavy, they were resolute. This meeting was but another step in their journey toward the final goodbye. It is unusual to see you beyond your domain, Odin remarked, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the misty expanse. Why have you come, child of endings? What burden brings you here? The End stared into the distance, avoiding Odin's piercing gaze. I have come to say goodbye, they said flatly. I am tired, Odin, tired of being the final page, the last breath in every story. I no longer wish to exist merely as the conclusion of others' tales. I seek my own end. Odin's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Goodbye? Why would you seek such a thing? He asked, his voice gentle but firm. You are a necessary part of the cycle, as vital as the beginnings and the middles. Without you, there is no resolution, no closure. The End shook their head, a bitter smile forming on their lips. Necessary? Is that what I am? I am nothing but the shadow that swallows light, the cold that follows warmth. I am tired of being the end of everything, while I myself have no end, no peace. I don't want to be necessary, I want to be free. Odin's gaze grew intense, his eye narrowing slightly. You speak out of despair, he said softly. You are in denial, my friend. Denial of your purpose, of your role in this grand tapestry. Without you, stories would linger on without resolution, without meaning. Denial. The End scoffed, their voice rising with frustration. Do not speak to me of denial, All-Father. I have accepted more endings than any being in existence. I have seen worlds crumble and gods fall. But what of my own end? Must I be trapped in this eternal cycle forever? Odin's expression remained calm, though his voice took on a more serious tone. You have been a part of this world for longer than most, and with that comes a burden, I understand. But consider the grief you would leave behind if you were to cease. Every ending needs its closure, and without you, what happens to the stories, to the people who depend on you? The End's eyes flashed with anger. I do not care! They shouted, their voice echoing through the mist. I do not care what happens to the stories. I do not care what happens to the world without me. I am tired, Odin. I am tired of being the last page, the final word. I want to end on my own terms, not just fade away page by page until there's nothing left. Odin sighed deeply, sensing the depth of the End's despair. You are bargaining with fate itself, he said softly, trying to negotiate your way out of your role, out of your existence. But there is no bargaining with destiny. Your presence is woven into the very fabric of reality. Without endings, there can be no new beginnings. I do not want to be part of this fabric anymore. The End replied, their voice cracking with a mixture of anger and sorrow. I want to rip myself free to find my own end, even if it means tearing a hole in the universe itself. Odin remained silent for a moment, his gaze thoughtful and contemplative. Then he spoke again, his tone softer, almost pleading. You are in the midst of grief, my friend. You have passed through denial, through anger, and now you seek to bargain your way out of pain. But this path leads only to sorrow. The End turned away, unwilling to face the wisdom in Odin's words. I do not wish to grieve, they muttered. I wish to cease, to end, to no longer exist. You cannot skip to acceptance without feeling the pain that comes before it, Odin replied. To accept your role, you must first accept the pain that comes with it. To find peace, you must embrace the sorrow. A tear rolled down the End's cheek, unbidden and unnoticed. I have accepted nothing, they whispered, and I will accept nothing. I will not be a puppet to fate, dancing on the strings of destiny. I want my own end, my own peace. Odin's expression softened, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and compassion. Then you must walk this path alone, he said quietly. But know this, you will be missed, my friend. By the stories you have ended, by the lives you have touched, by the worlds that have depended on you. The world would be lesser without you. The End shook their head, their voice barely a whisper. I do not care about the world. I only care about finding an end to this emptiness, this endless cycle of sorrow. Odin nodded slowly, a look of deep sadness in his eyes. Then go, child of endings, he said softly. Go and find your peace. But know that you will always have a place in this world, a place in this story, no matter how much you may wish to leave it behind. With a heavy heart, the End turned away, clutching the map Odin had given them, a map not to guide them to understanding, but to lead them through the final steps of their journey, to the place where they hoped to find their own end. As they walked away from Odin, the mists closed in around them, their path shrouded in uncertainty and despair. The End knew they were only beginning to confront the depths of their grief, the stages of sorrow that awaited them on this final journey. But for now they pressed on, determined to find a way to end their own story, to find peace in the nothingness beyond the veil. Chapter 3. The Twisting Path. After his encounter with Odin, the End felt a surge of grim determination pushing him forward. He had made his choice. He would not simply fade away, page by page, bound by the role that the universe had given him. Instead, he would step off the edge of the known and walk into the realm where few dared to tread, the realm of chaos. He left the structured narratives behind, stepping out of the neatly organized chapters and verses that had defined his existence for so long. As he walked off the metaphorical page, the orderly world of stories began to dissolve around him, replaced by a swirling vortex of shadows and light, of forms that shifted and dissolved like ink in water. He had crossed into a place where stories broke apart, where the lines blurred and the end was never truly certain. It was here, amidst this chaos, that he hoped to find his own conclusion. In the distance, through the roiling mist, he saw it, the mirror. This was no ordinary mirror. It was a portal into the deepest fears and darkest truths, a reflection that stripped away all pretense and forced one to confront their innermost selves. The End approached cautiously, drawn by a compulsion to see what lay within. As he peered into the mirror, he was confronted with a vision of himself, once strong and purposeful, now weary and broken. The reflection twisted and morphed, showing him every regret, every failure, every moment of despair he had ever faced. His hands trembled as he watched, his breath catching in his throat. It was as though the mirror were mocking him, showing him the futility of his existence, the endless cycle of endings that had brought him to this point. And then, from the depths of the mirror, a monstrous form emerged, a dark, shifting creature that embodied all his fears. It was fear itself, given shape and substance. The creature lunged forward, shattering the mirror into 1,000 shards that scattered like falling stars. The End stumbled back, panic seizing him as the monster charged. For a moment, he did what everyone does when confronted with their darkest fears. He ran. He turned and fled, his heart pounding, his breath ragged. The monster gave chase, its footsteps echoing like thunder in the chaotic landscape. But then, as the terror threatened to overwhelm him, he stopped. He turned to face the creature, his voice steady, his gaze unyielding. "Kill me then," he demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. End it all. But fear, when confronted head-on, often loses its power. As soon as the End stood his ground, the monster began to dissolve, its form fading into wisps of smoke and shadow. The shards of the mirror vanished, leaving behind nothing but empty space. The fear was gone, and so too was the creature that had embodied it. The End was left standing alone, his breath steady now, his resolve even firmer. He knew there was no turning back. He continued his journey through the chaos, and soon he arrived at a large ancient desk. A desk that seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction, piled high with papers and scrolls in every conceivable language. It was the desk of knowledge, a place where every question that could ever be asked had an answer written down somewhere among the endless pages. He approached the desk with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Here was every piece of knowledge, every secret, every truth that had ever been pondered. The temptation was overwhelming. to search through these pages, to lose himself in the endless scroll of knowledge, to find answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. But then, the End realized the true nature of this place. It was a trap, a labyrinth of endless information that could ensnare a soul forever, leaving them lost in a never-ending quest for answers. He understood that to linger here would be to surrender his quest for his own end, to be caught in an endless cycle of seeking and never finding. With a resolute grimace, he reached out and overturned the desk, scattering the papers into the void. With a flick of his wrist, he ignited a flame that spread quickly across the papers, consuming them in a brilliant blaze of light. He watched as the answers burned, as the pages crumbled into ash and were carried away by the winds of chaos. The End knew there was no answer here, only distraction, only another form of imprisonment. As the last of the papers burned, the path before him began to clear. He saw a faint glow ahead, a light that seemed to beckon him forward. It was the way back to the realm of stories, back to the place where he knew he must say his final farewell. He felt a strange calm settle over him, a sense of purpose that had eluded him for so long. With steady steps, he walked toward the light, feeling the chaotic realm slowly fall away behind him. The mist parted, revealing the familiar terrain of the narrative realm. He knew where he needed to go, who he needed to see before his final journey ended. "I will go out on my own terms," he whispered to himself, a quiet determination in his voice. "I will find my own ending." And so, with a heavy but resolved heart, the End made his way back to the place where all stories began, ready to face his old friend, once upon a time, one last time. Chapter 4, The Farewell. The realm of Once Upon a Time was alive with a vibrant energy that filled the air, a stark contrast to the heavy weight that the End carried within. It was a place of beginnings, where every story sparkled with the promise of adventure, joy, and possibility. As the End stepped into this domain, they were greeted by their old friend, Once Upon a Time, who approached with a warm smile and a glass of wine in hand. "Ah, my dear friend," Once Upon a Time said cheerfully, offering the glass to the End. "Sit with me for a while. Let us talk, as we did in the old days." The End accepted the glass, nodding with a faint smile. "Yes," they replied softly, "let's talk." They found a quiet spot amidst the lively celebration that swirled around them. The sounds of laughter and music filled the air, but here, in this small corner of the realm, it felt as if time itself had paused. Once Upon a Time spoke of mundane things, of stories yet to be told, of characters waiting for their moment in the light. The End listened, their heart heavy but comforted by the familiar cadence of their friend's voice. For a while they spoke of everything and nothing, of the joys and sorrows that had marked their shared existence. But there was a gravity to this conversation, an unspoken understanding that this was not just another meeting but a final farewell. Eventually, the End placed their glass down, a look of resolve in their eyes. "It's time," they said quietly, their voice barely audible above the distant revelry. "I have to go now. Goodbye, my friend. You are always my favorite part of every story." Once Upon a Time nodded, their smile tinged with sadness, but also acceptance. "And you, my friend," they replied softly, "were always my most cherished companion, to new beginnings and good ends." With a heavy heart, the End turned away from their old friend and walked toward a doorway that had appeared before them, a simple wooden door that seemed to shimmer slightly, as if caught between two worlds. They reached out, their hand trembling slightly, and pushed the door open. Beyond it lay a thick veil of mist, an unknown that beckoned with quiet promise. Stepping through the doorway, the End found themselves in a different realm, a place that felt both familiar and strange. The mist swirled around them, soft and welcoming. And as it began to clear, they saw a figure approaching, a young child with bright eyes and a gentle smile. "Hello," the child greeted, their voice filled with an innocent warmth. "Welcome, I am the new end." The end froze, shock rippling through their being. For a moment, they could only stare at the child, processing the words, the realization, a new end. A successor to carry on the role they had borne for so long. Slowly, a smile spread across the end's face. A genuine smile that carried with it a sense of peace and relief. "Good," they whispered, their voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. "I leave this work in your hands." The child nodded, their expression serious but kind. "I will do my best," they promised, their voice firm with resolve. With a deep breath, the end felt a profound sense of release wash over them, a lightness they had not felt in eons. They had done what they had set out to do. They had found their closure, their final page, and so with a last lingering smile, the end closed their eyes and let go, their form dissolving into the mist, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of an echo. The cycle continued, the stories went on, and a new end took their place, ready to carry on the eternal dance of storytelling. The end,